Hi, this is Ray with School of Racing Graphics. I'm getting ready to design a sim car. I've not designed a sim car in a long time, so this will be a first well, not really a first, but a first in maybe, I don't know, 8 years, 10 years, something like that. So somebody had asked me to do one, and so I wanted to use a couple of graphics from SRGFX.com to make that happen. I think I'll knock it out actually pretty quick. I'm going to go ahead and use T-shirt graphic 8. You can see it right here on the website. And I'm just going to kind of show you my process and how I break things down pretty simply. Typically when I use one of our resources, I never typically use them just as they are. I always modify them or just take a piece out and start building around one of the pieces, but I usually never just take and copy and paste piece and then just use just that. And usually as I keep going and I keep designing, I'm able to kind of modify it, and it evolves into something more, into something even different than what I had anticipated in the first place. Now this is a car I've already designed. You can see this number 8 car. I lost the vector file for it, so I don't know what I did with it, but this is the design I want to use. So I'm going to use the graphic I used to build the car, but I'm going to do it all over again, basically just starting from scratch. We're going to be working in Photoshop since this is for sim. Now if I wanted to, I could probably design this as a vector and then pull it all over, but I'll mostly modify in Adobe Illustrator, then come over in Adobe Photoshop and manipulate things if I see fit. But since the template is already all laid out, and this template's from Sling & Dirt, you can see here the credits for who built and modified and edited the template. So shout out to the guys at Sling & Dirt. Got Adam, Tim Miller, Tyler Sutton, Ron Benader, however you say that, Forrest Lane, Jimmy Emery, James Emery. I feel like on Facebook you go by a different name. We'll just say Jim and Marcus Mackey. And so I'm just using their template here. And so basically just getting this design to here. One of the things for me about designing a sim car is I like to be able to see the proof like in 3D as I'm going, so this will be a little bit difficult. So I'll design it and then I'll give it to the guy, and he might send it back and forth to me a couple of different times to get me to modify it, or maybe I'll just allow him to modify the design so he can kind of get it where he wants to get it, because I always find that there's a little bit of nudging around that has to be done once you see it on the 3D render. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pull over here. I'm just going to start grabbing the graphics now. I'm not really interested again in using everything that's here. I mostly just want to use the basic shapes and then kind of build out from there. I'm going to send this to the back. Now if you're not an Illustrator user and you like use Corel or FlexiSign or LXI or something like that, you might find this a lot different from what you're used to using. Really, I find that
Sorry, I'm not sure.
There's Alexa checking in on us. I don't really know why. I didn't say her name. 1 second, let me see if I can turn her off.
Sorry, I don't know that.
Goodbye, Alexa. So basically, typically when I see one of these shapes, I just kind of break it down into seeing the most basic piece that I want to use. So you can see here, when I created this graphic, I knew I wanted some kind of a, I don't know, like the shape breakup to be right here. This is where the contrast is according to the shapes. So I'm going to use that element, maybe size it up a little bit more. And then I'm going to just take this in. And I just kind of want you to see my process about how I go through and edit these, because you might think, man, the car in the example is so much different than the graphic, what the graphic looks like in the product, and that's because I go through and I do a lot of different things to them, just to get it. I don't like to keep it cookie cutter. I want to create it, and then also just make it so different that you can see the possibilities with the product. Because I think some people, they'll buy the product and they just use it as is, that's okay. I guess that's fine to do that. But it's there's so many more options or so many more things you can do with the graphics themselves. Now I could have just used the pen tool to do this, but the first time that I created this graphic, I was messing around with this shape, and then I kept on messing around with it until I landed on something that I liked. And so that's why I'm using this same process. So you can see here I'm kind of making a pretty big mess. But what I'll do is I'll go through and clean all that up. So what I'll do is I'm going to take this. Now in Illustrator, the eraser tool is like really handy. It's just Command E, and then if you hold down Shift, it just erases straight lines, so you can do stuff like that and just kind of cut stuff out so we can get rid of all this garbage that we really actually don't need. And then I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this, and there's a couple of different things I can do here. Again, it doesn't have to be the same exact as what I had before. I might do it a little bit different. Something like that. And again, I have the right to trace this car because it's my car. So if you're just climbing on board and you think he's tracing a car, well, yeah, I'm tracing my own car. So, and sometimes like so that's the basic shape. But sometimes I'll even see that and I'll start messing with it and modifying it. But just to keep this video short, I'll probably leave this as is. Something like that. I'm not, I don't actually even care if the lines are even. I just care that they look aggressive. There are times when it's important to make sure the lines look even. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it. Let's see here. I'll do red. That. And then I'm going to unlock this. That white. We'll do this red for now. Like that. And so we got pretty close here to what we need just to bring it over. So then what I'll do is in the PSD file, I'll just turn the background of the car black. And you can see on this one too, I left the sails and the pillars and all that black. I just think it kind of cut up the way it cut up, and it ends up looking pretty nice. Okay, so I'm just going to copy and paste this, and I can do it as layers, like layered over. I have no idea what the size is going to be when I bring it over, so that's actually a little too small. So I'll bring it over as a smart object, and a smart object's just going to allow me to stretch it out and mess with it that way. And this car might be, the shape of this car is obviously going to be a little bit different than my template. Kind of get it in there. That. And then I'm just going to, looks like they already have the right door. And I'm going to turn off the wireframe for now. See here. Nope, leaving that on. So yeah, you can see it's been a while since I've messed with anything in Sim. Now typically what I do when I'm designing a car, before I ever even put graphics in, I typically do all the sponsor elements first. And sponsors, numbers, and everything. Now on iRacing, the numbers are obviously designated in the game, and so you can't really add a number here. I think if you play one player, I'm not that familiar with it, but I think if you play like one player by yourself, you can have your own number on the wrap. But if you play online, it's like the numbers are designated, or you pick a number and then it automatically places it on your car or whatever, like something like that. So basically, I always get all the elements that belong on the car, and then place the graphics. But because I already know what this car is going to look like, because I've designed it already, I can kind of get away with what I'm gonna do with this. And I'm gonna go ahead and do the plastic on this, the same red color. Now one of the mistakes that I see all the time with second here. With sim racing is when somebody paints a car, let's say it's going to be red or blue or whatever, they do the absolute most saturated version of that color. So like for instance, it's like this color blue right here is really popular in sim racing, but honestly what it does is it blows out your screen, blows out the car, kind of takes away some of the dynamics of the 3D elements and things like that. And so I always, when I'm working in sim, because it's screen based, I always tone the colors down just a little bit so they don't have to be like super super bright. You know, it's better to have it a little bit dull, and then it allows for the actual realism to take over, because honestly this bright color right here is not really real to the eye except for on a screen. So if you go to the racetrack, you're not going to see like a bright blue like this. Now you'll see variations of it, and maybe in certain shadows and in certain parts of the car might look that blue. But the reality is that our eyes just don't really typically see that bright unless something's backlit. So I always tone it down, including my reds. Another thing in sim racing is, you know, if somebody has a black car, they turn it all the way black. I always pull it back just a little bit. It'll look black, but it's like more of like a charcoal or a dark gray. And that allows for all the dynamics that the car, the 3D elements and the shading, it allows it to overlay in those areas so that you can actually see the shadows and the dynamics of the 3D render itself. Okay, so I got this little piece here. Now, I purposefully brought this in as a smart object because if I bring it back into Illustrator, I can edit it. So let's say I want to go into Illustrator and see it, pulled it over here and did some weird stuff, and I don't really feel like explaining why it did that, but I need to get this area here red. So basically I can double click the Vector Smart object, bring it into Illustrator, make the modification, and then when I come back to Photoshop, that modification will be made. So even if I go back to Illustrator and let's say I want to turn this totally different color, let's say I want it to be orange, I can save it, bring it back over to Photoshop, and it's orange. And so this is why Illustrator and Photoshop work really, really well together. They're like brother and sister programs. So, okay, I'm going to go back in and make sure that that's actually red. And now that I have my graphic created, I'm just going to close this. And I'll do that. And you can, you know, like let's say I want to save that later. I can come back and save and reopen that Vector Smart object and then save it out again later. So the sponsor for this particular car is going to be SRGFX. So I'm going to go ahead and get that logo. Here it is. And I just want to use the thin one. And again, I'm going to bring it in as a Vector Smart object. And that's just going to go right here. Something like that. And I might play with it and do something like that. I don't always like tilting the graphics, only because a couple of different reasons. Sometimes it's like once you commit to tilting, you're kind of like going to tilt them all, and it just kind of like takes over the design and really kind of manipulates and determines what you're going to do with the rest of the design. So I might like tilt that back so it's straight, but you can see I got to move it up a lot, and so I don't really like that. It makes it look uneven. So really, until I see this particular design like in the game, I'm not really going to know what I want to do with that sponsor. I might just back it off a little bit here. Something like that. And then let's see here. I'm going to actually size this up just a little bit more. Bring that down. And it's, to me, like, so here's another thing is like when you're designing a car without the number there, or without like the sponsors and stuff, like it's to me it's really really difficult. Until you can really like see the elements and what they're going to look like, I think that they don't really look that good. So like this, it's like it actually is a pretty mean looking graphic when you see it on the car in full context. It's in the right position and the logos are right and all that kind of stuff. But like when you just got it slidden in there with one logo, it kind of looks boring. So I've always just found commit to getting all your sponsors in place and all the numbers and stuff in place. And then you'll notice that your graphic will look a lot better when you place it in at the very end. I did this in reverse order. I probably shouldn't have, but this isn't really a super official video anyway, so I'm just kind of more messing around and just getting used to using the video software that goes live. So this is part one. I'll probably do a part two. I need to get the logo from the guy that I'm creating this for, and a couple other things to put the rest together. But you can kind of see how all this starts playing out and working together. Now, one other thing is Photoshop has this nice little feature. Let's see if I can select the graphic there. And so if the graphic is over top of the actual shape of the car, which is this right door, you can create a clipping mask and it'll just clip to the shape that's under it. Because that door is overlaid in black, let's see here. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to release the clipping mask. I'm going to turn my door black, but I'm actually going to back it off a little bit, make it kind of more of a charcoal gray. Something like that. Then I'm going to make a new layer. That was Shift Command N or Shift Control N, and then I'm going to merge these together. The other thing you could do is apply, I think you can, let's see, apply styles. I know that's somewhere. Yeah, rasterize layer style. So that'll rasterize it. So now that overlays on there as black. So the actual raster piece or that particular layer is set. So I didn't need to create that new layer. And now I will create clipping mask. There you go. So now all that's kind of gone from that area there. And then I'm just going to go ahead, and it's probably a good habit to get into to just like color all of your pieces first before you start going through and designing, just so you can kind of get a general feel. So that's part one of this video. I'll probably do a part two. I might redo part one. Really, I'm just kind of testing out some video software and messing around with some sim cars, nothing super official. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments on YouTube.